Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Complete Creative, the podcast that helps you build a thriving creative business. And today on the show, we have my good friend, Kristopher Wile. I've known Chris almost as long as I've lived in LA. I've watched him when he was an assistant, and I've watched him direct short films and commercials and produce documentaries. And he's just a wonderful creative human that has built his career constructing and creating commercial and artistic products. He employs all sorts of creative humans as well. Before we get started, I want to remind you that I have a whole bunch of additional non-podcast content on thecompletecreative.com. There are epic blog posts, free courses, paid courses, including my probably my favorite course, which is completely free, and it's how to write a great novel. And if you head on over to thecompletecreative.com/courses, you can check it out for yourself. And now, without further ado, let's get on with the show. Take it away, Chris. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
You know, it's funny because I feel like I spend so much time just like working that my work is a passion, and it definitely consumes quite a bit of my life. But when I'm not working, I enjoy spending time with my family, but also just enjoy my guilty pleasure. Less guilty. I'm not really guilty about it, but I love logging into Crunchyroll and just like binging a bunch of anime. That's kind of my passion right now.
What's your favorite one?
Oh man, I'm a One Piece nerd, just completely. But man, I'm watching a lot of your shonen shows at the moment. So like a My Hero Academia, or like a Black Clover. So it's a lot of your character A wants to be the blank or wants to be the best blank, right? And then the whole show is like their adventure, how they try and accomplish their dream. But I think that really resonates with me, my personality, because I'm definitely a bit of a dreamer. And definitely put certain dreams on pedestals, so that I think I find that very empathetic. And it's nice to have that bit of catharsis of someone else chasing somebody else, their own dream. But I like the heavy ones too. I mean, you've got your classic dark shows like Death Note. There's one I love, and I'm probably not gonna pronounce it correctly, but Akame ga Kill, which I adore. I think it's just like a brutal show, like Game of Thrones style. There's like no respect for any character. Like you could fall in love with someone and they're gonna die. But what I love about it is they make you care about them before they kill them off. They make you care so much, and it's great. And then they're just so great at exploring like the gray areas and like nuance of like people who think they're doing good, or people who think they are like evil action derived from good intention, basically. And that's a really compelling theme for me. I find that really interesting.
Me too. It's one of the things that I think flows through my own work, but I have to ask you about the One Piece thing, because I saw this. Have you seen the graph that showed the most popular manga over the past 25 years? And it was like
it's like a Facebook GIF.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
I've definitely seen it.
25 years. One Piece has been the most popular manga without nothing has come close to it. 25 straight years of it being the most popular manga. That is bananas.
It's massive. I love it. I love it so much. It's like such a weird little show not a show, like a weird little manga. And then the show, of course, is equally as weird. But man, I love it so much. And the fan base is huge, and it's massively international. So my wife and I went to visit Beijing, and we were there, and they have all these little markets and tourist traps and whatnot. But like I'd see all these little side shops, and they'd have like rip off like fake One Piece merchandise that they were just like making themselves and like trying to sell to tourists. Like, and I'm like, this is China. Like, why? What's going on here? Um, but like, there's like a subreddit for it, and it's a huge subreddit. Um, and like every so often, you'll see someone post something. Like I think like during the last World Cup, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was after, because I think Japan did fairly well last time. And it's like after their game they had lost, but some like fellow One Piece fans from these different countries ended up running into each other like at the stadium and just started singing the theme song together. And it was like this video that went viral on Reddit for a hot moment, and it was beautiful. I almost teared up. It was great.
Yeah, I mean I like stories like that. That's like the good in the world, right? Like
Right.
we're stuck with so much bad in the world constantly bombarding us that like I've been trying to figure out like how to zone all of that out without derelicting my duty to being a part of the world.
Right, right. Well, it's like that's the beauty of fandom, right? I mean, it's like there's a trade-off to it, of course. Like fandom can also be very negative, but it can also be such like a unifying force, and it can cross cultures and cross nationalities, right? It's like you know, people enjoy what they enjoy. And then like if you realize that you enjoy the same thing that somebody else enjoys, I mean it humanizes them first of all, but two, like it provides like a conduit for communication and empathy in some capacity, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's at the heart of it. You know, I mean, for me, when I think about making work or making something, it's about like taking a little piece of myself and having it resonate with the little piece of the reader or the viewer or the person who's watching it. And then if you do that a bunch of times, you suddenly have like everyone is resonating at that same sort of frequency of weird together, and it creates something across continents and across ages that that is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, it's you know, obviously easier said than done, which I mean, you know very well. And also I think very terrifying as the creator, just because you are, you know, you're making a massive assumption in terms of, not an assumption, but like you're taking the liberty of trying to understand what your audience is going to resonate with and creating something that, you know, that they will resonate with, right? And I think there are different approaches to it, right? Sometimes you create something with no audience in mind and just you think it's good and you hope other people will too. And then other times you do the complete opposite, where you're like, you know, I just want to make something that people are going to like because I need to sell something. But you know, and you're kind of chasing that commercial idea, but you know, there's a vulnerability there as well for the creator, that like you're exposing a part of who you are, whether it's a good part, whether it's not a good part. Because I think as a creator, there's always a realness that you kind of bring to the table, and you're hoping that people don't take that and just like throw it back in your face and make you regret ever putting it out in the world.
Yeah, you know, the older I get as a creator, and the more I do this, the more I don't want to say resonate, but I connect with George Lucas. He did this interview when he was selling Disney. Say when he was selling Lucasfilm to Disney, where he just looked defeated, where he's like, "Look, I'm trying to like be a good steward for this thing. Like I'm trying, but I clearly am not the right steward." And I feel that very deep in my bones, because as I make stuff, and especially when something is successful and you go back to it like I did with my book Ichabod Jones, after years of being away from it, I just delivered this book, the next issue of Ichabod after 10 years basically of not working with it. And I'm freaking out because I'm like, is there going to be this George Lucas effect, or are people going to resonate still in the same way that they did with the first thing that I made? I mean, I was quite a bit younger. I was in my mid-20s and much angrier, much more despondent, and much more disillusioned than I am now currently. So trying to go back to those wells is luckily, so far at least, the few people who've responded have not been in with vitriol, so I'm happy. But it's something I think about all the time.
You bring up an interesting point, because I wonder. I'd be really curious to see if with Ichabod, if your audience, because like, let's say some kid were to stumble across Ichabod and start reading it now, right? They're going to have a lot more access to the story than like I did when I first encountered it. I mean, I have a soft spot for Ichabod and Katrina. Those were like the first two things of yours that I engaged with. I remember like messaging you on AIM back in the day, because that's what we did. AIM and email, but just being like, hey, can you send me the PDF? Because I need to show it to my boss. like the Hollywood game, right? But there was only like the one or two issues, I think. And now that there are more, I mean, like, an audience first encountering Ichabod is not going to know, like, they're not going to have you here to tell them like, oh yeah, there was like a X number of years gap between these issues. They're just going to read them through. And I wonder if they'll be able to tell the difference in terms of like who you as the author are as a person, or like what you're putting into it or not. Or if they're just going to take it in stride and just be like, yeah, this is how it's developing now. Like between individual issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because I have had people come to the book that just that have been fans basically since I launched it. Some of them even buying the books before the Kickstarter. So like very, very old fans,
Mm-hmm.
and I have ones coming in fresh, brand new. And so I can't, that like have known me for other works, but I haven't really talked about Ichabod for years. Ichabod has been this book that was quite unpopular when it launched and has developed in a weird way just by the fact that other books have been popular enough for me to continue my career. It's just like slowly continue to be on a table and continue to grow this thing, whereas my other books have been much more popular as far as the initial burst of when they came on the scene. Ichabod has just been this thing that, like, I don't know, people can't get out of their head. So I have had people now who've emailed me since the books have started being delivered who were old school fans and who are like brand new fans who've never heard of Ichabod until I started talking about it a few months ago. And it's really interesting to see both of their reactions being positive, but in a much different way. The new fans just like, this is great. When is issue 7 coming out? And the old ones engaging in this dialogue where they're analyzing the different, like what happened between 4 and 5. And I was very lucky in that the first 8 pages of issue 5 were actually drawn in 2011. And then the rest of it was drawn more this past year. So there's a lot more ease of transition than you normally would get.
Right. It's not just a sudden abrupt transition between issues.
Yeah. So you talked about something that sort of is the reason that I wanted to talk to you. Not that I always enjoy talking to you, but you talked about the sort of the difference between making something commercial and making something art. And I'm hoping you can speak to that, because I think it's when I think of your career, and I've known you since you were an assistant before your current company even existed, or existed in the capacity that it does now. How do you make that that determination between like the commercial project and the art project, and how does each one sort of develop?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, I wish I could give a really succinct answer to that. Or, I mean, I wish I was a more of an expert on that than I am. Because I think we're all trying to kind of gauge and navigate that question. Even just like tried and true creatives in multiple different industries, right? Because ultimately, as an artist, you're driven by your taste, and you're driven by what you would like to see. So you're navigating these two pools or these two poles, one might say. And on one end, it's like what, in terms of content, what kind of content you enjoy consuming. Um, like when you're as a writer, right? Often a lot of writers, their first foray into writing often is fan fiction, or it's it's imitation of style, right? It's like you read a book, you read a short story, a comic book, whatever it is, you see a movie, and you're like, I love that so much, I want to make something like that. And then you start trying to write or trying to create in a similar style to like, that author or that screenwriter, that director, whatever your medium is. And then eventually you kind of, and it's a good training tool, right? It's kind of like, and I don't want to make it sound like this is, I don't want to make it sound like this is a negative thing, but it's like you're like a baby, saying baby, like, doing like baby talk, right? It's like you're practicing, like as a baby, you're practicing like mouth shapes and mouth sounds, and trying to figure it out. And your little brain is like, rushing at a frantic speed to learn context or syntax and hardwire it into your brain, and I feel like the artist journey is very similar in that capacity, where like, you start imitating the people in arts that you love as you are learning the rules of the world and craft that you're pursuing. And then you kind of launch off from there. So that being said, you're grounded in your own taste. Now that may be a very eccentric taste. There may not be that many people out there who share the same taste. And so that's sort of the difference between like the arts, right, and the commercial side. Because if it's commercial, well, you ideally need a larger audience, or you need to be working in a space where you can charge a premium to a smaller audience. Anime is a great example, actually. So traditionally, and the model is changing because of streaming and how international everything has gotten, but traditionally, anime was designed to sell something else. So anime, the investors in an anime were usually like the manga publisher. Like they put together something called a production committee. And it's basically all the vested entities who wanted to, who have like a financial interest in the property. So you might have like a toy company investing money, and then you might have the manga publisher who, have the source material and they put in money, and then you might have the video game developer and they put in money. And then all of these entities form this committee that kind of guide the ship for this anime. But unlike in the US, where like the financial point of an animation is, you want to make the money back from the box office and then from, your downstream revenue opportunities, right? DVD, streaming, etc. But like the whole point is like, the animation itself as a product is what is making money. It is its own point. But in the anime world, traditionally, it's really just a vector to sell something else. So it's a vector, like an animated show, like an anime would, the point of an anime would be to get people to buy more of the manga, or to buy toys, or to, buy more video game downloads or whatever it is. So it's a different model, and they knew that because it was a more niche audience, if the people who wanted to buy DVDs, like, they would charge a premium. So you would buy these box sets that were very expensive. Um, and so then, of course, there are other like considerations, like, you would limit like which countries can sell the DVDs and all of that kind of stuff, which, I mean, that happens anyway in film distribution and TV distribution, period. Like, you have these exclusive deals for different territories, but in that space, it was even more important because, if you're charging like $90 for a collectible DVD box set because you're only going to sell a certain number of them, so you have to recoup a bunch of costs like that way and make your profit, then like, that's even more important because you don't want cheaper versions of it becoming available overseas somewhere else. But I say all of that to say that, like, you have to balance like who your audience is and who you can sell to and what they're willing to pay versus your taste and versus the content that you like to consume. And if the content you like to consume, which is going to inevitably influence what you make, the content you make and how you make it, if that content does not have a very wide audience, then you're going to have to make some hard choices, and you're going to have to adapt your business model to try and compensate.
That's so important because that's what I'm finding for my own work actually right now is, I tried to make something that was a little more, the books that I was putting out or have a quite niche audience, like they're mythological fantasy basically, or dark fantasy with humor, like dark, funny fantasy, which is not a large audience. And so when I would put it out in a mass market, I would still get the same number of sales. And those sales weren't lucrative enough for me to continue doing things, for me to make the work that I was making. So I actually started to charge. I'd gone and made these hardcover books, which are like collectible items. They're considerably more expensive, $30 or $40 to then the $10 or $15 that most books are. And I was able to make. I've been able to make a living because I focused and doubled down on making a premium product for a premium price point. Because, and especially and specifically because the audience that was willing to buy that product was are very rabid, but they are few and far between.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think it's an interesting point because, I mean, you look at, I mean, like, technically the content is the same, right? You're telling the same story. They're the same images. Obviously, your cover art and everything like that is different, but I mean, sometimes I assume, but for the most part, I mean, if you look at the story itself as the product, it's the same product. The difference is that it's how it's packaged and how it's framed, and in reality, what you've done is you've segmented your market. So you've realized that, like, the market for your content is not one homogenous thing. You actually have two different markets, and honestly, I mean, you could even look at it as like two different businesses, right? And you have one market and one demographic who are interested in the single issue, the single issues, right? And then you have another market that's interested in something that's more durable and longer. So rather than having multiple books for one story, they'd rather get it all in one chunk in a continuous stream of content. But they want a higher quality, right? And they're willing to pay for that quality. And they're willing to pay for sort of the idea and the feel and of having something valuable that's theirs, right? That they can have on their bookshelf and feel good about, seeing that spine, that title on that spine, and it's on their bookshelf as part of their collection. And I think that's something that a lot of it's not even just a creative thing. Like, I talk to people. I mean, it's something I deal with in my industry. which very easily commoditizes what I do. But I've seen it in others too, where you realize that like it's very easy to lump your market into one group, but that's not true. And you have different buying habits um, and purchasing behaviors, even within the same group, like mass of people who are all technically interested in your product. Like it's the same product, but how they want to engage with it is different. So being able to like identify that and make adjustments accordingly can really help.
It's so funny. I was just talking with someone this morning about he was trying to launch a podcast on Patreon without putting it anywhere else. It was only going to be available on Patreon. And so, what do you think happened when people like heard about this business model or like listening model? They all revolted and they were like, well, why isn't it on iTunes, and why isn't it on all these places, and why isn't it on the place that I listen to the podcast? Like, why do I have to change my listening habits? And this is it's free, right? It's free.
Right.
Technically, I mean, I'm making an assumption that it is also good and free. So like, even in the world of like free, people don't want to change what they're doing. I was listening to, I think I was listening to a masterclass with Howard Schultz yesterday, and he was saying like changing somebody's buying habits is almost impossible unless you are willing to take a loss for a long, 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 long time, which is possible. Like you could do it. And then like you will be the innovator who makes a new thing, and like that will be great. But it's much easier to go to the habits that people already have and then like disrupt the thing that they're already doing in a way that makes you the place to go instead of all of the other books or whatever that you could have. So dropping yourself down into an already existing market, even if assuming there's not like, well, we both work in a very highly competitive market, but is just considerably easier than trying to change someone's buying habits to like one thing over another. In fact, I deal with this in my own thing because I have people that like my Katrina comics, and I've been trying for a year to convince them that like they should read the novels.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, first, it's not on Kickstarter or at a show, which is where I buy from you. And then B, it's not a comic book. And C, it's not physical. So I've been dealing with these three sort of like barriers when people are just like, just release a comic on Kickstarter. I will buy that comic on Kickstarter. Just go there and make the thing that I already want. And even taking the audience you have and migrating them slightly to another method of communication or of content delivery is almost impossible.
Right. And that's, and then you're faced with the choice, right? It's like, do you persist, right? Do you take that loss and try and convince people to change their habits? Do you give up on that endeavor, right? And because, I mean, the truth is, like, if there's an existing business model that's working, and as long as it's not hyper saturated to beyond what the market can support, you can imitate that model and you could probably get work or close sales or whatever your end goal is. You can probably make it work. You'll be one in a million, but you'll get some revenue because there's already a primed audience and market that's ready and practiced to purchase in that way. Or do you shift your model, right? Like if you don't want to shift your product, but you realize you're targeting the wrong market, or your business model is not correct to sell that product, do you shift your model in a way that's going to be more conducive to selling that product? And that may be a radical shift, and you may find yourself in a type of business that you never thought you would be in order to convert on that product in the way that you would like to. And I talk a big game. This is not something that I'm particularly great at myself at the moment, but it's something I would like to be better at. But I love cross-pollination, and I love looking at industries and business models that aren't my own, that are just, like businesses that would just work radically different than how my industry works, and seeing like, hey, like, are there any comparisons here? Are there any similarities? Are there parallels? Could I apply techniques or strategies from this industry to my own or to something else, right? And maybe I can't, but maybe I can. And like, like for example, I've been talking to some people recently, and I don't know if it's a trend that's, I don't know where this came from. It's been really interesting in the B2B space where, you'll get B2B folks now who, as a lead generation tool, they're starting to use podcasts as like a lead generation tool. So their goal is basically to host a podcast, invite high-level executives in their target industries and verticals to be guests on their podcasts. And then they basically establish a relationship and a rapport with them. And the hope is eventually that person will see them as a potential vendor or potential, whatever it is that they do, right? And so, I've had discussions with some of these people, and it's so interesting to me because a lot of times they view it like they're like, well, it's a podcast, so like I need to figure out how to get these people on the show, and I'm like, well, okay, but you're creating a podcast, you're creating content. What's the format going to be? And it's funny because some people are very savvy and they've already thought through that kind of thing, but sometimes they haven't, and they're like, well, that's not as important to me, and I'm like, well, you're still creating content, and like, who's the audience for your podcast? And they're not thinking about the audience, and they're not thinking about the format and whether the format is going to attract a certain type of audience. They're only thinking about that end result of trying to convert on their guests, basically. And I realized that like the disconnect, what was sort of rubbing me the wrong way, is that their business model was incomplete. And what they were essentially doing without realizing it is they were recreating the television advertising model where, if you look at television, like broadcast television, that's ad supported. Who is ABC, right? Who is ABC's customer? Their customer is not the viewer. The viewer is ABC's leverage. All those people who sign on between at certain hours to watch, I'm trying to think of an ABC show. Blackish, that's ABC, right? But like the customer, or like the viewer who signs in to watch that show, right? They're not ABC's customer. They're ABC's leverage to attract their customer, because their actual customer are the media buyers. Like their actual customer are the ad agencies on behalf of the brands who are buying commercial space. That's how they make their money. That's their customer. However, in order to attract the right kind of customer, they have to bring in a certain type of audience. So they tailor their content and the format of their content to reach that audience. So they basically back into the type of shows they need to be making based on the type of shows that, based on the type of brands they want to attract and sell ads to. And obviously it's more nuanced than that, because you do have a creative component to it, and, they're telling stories and they want to tell strong stories as well. But at its heart, that's the business model. And, with these podcasts as lead generation tools, it's the same thing. It's just a podcast instead of a TV network. But, their customer are these business executives. Well, what's going to attract the business executives they want to convert? It's who those people want to talk to. So you have to curate an audience that those business executives are going to they're going to have to get in front of, right? You have to like make it so attractive that like they would be stupid to refuse a guest opportunity on your show. And now you're building a funnel that actually brings in your target target market, but you're doing so by curating content for a whole other audience that you're not monetizing. So like I mean, and that's a very long-winded way of saying like I love comparisons like that where you realize it's the same business model. It's just, different verticals, but it's very, very similar. And I think you can learn from that. And if you have like a product that maybe is not geared well towards your industry or your market as it now stands, maybe there's insight and inspiration from other verticals that you can pull in that will suddenly make that a win, but it's up to the creator or the creative in the business entity to be able to scramble like that and call that audible.
Absolutely. And I think that the success comes from molding a bunch of different business models, not business models, but business ideas together. Like every success that I've had comes from studying some other type of business and then integrating, 1% of it into what I do. Mm-hmm. So it looks like a publishing company, or like what I do looks like being a writer, but it's not all being a writer. It also pulls in this thing from like what hotels do, and this thing from what TV networks do, and this thing from what novels do, and these three things from what comics do, and this thing from what plumbers do, and this thing from what people who do commercials do, and being able to have that thing that looks mostly like that anyone outside of like looking in will say, well, that is that kind of company. But just having that differentiating factor tends to be the thing that really sets you apart, even though it's not really something that sets you apart because it's something that's found. It's just not something that's found in your industry, but it's something that can be modeled from some other industry.
Mm-hmm. And I think honestly, you asked about, the difference between art and like commercial work, and the commercial side of it is just, it's really what it is just understanding that it's business. Like if you're asking people to pay money for your stuff, whatever stuff that is, you are a business owner. You're an entrepreneur, and you need to think about it that way. Does that mean that needs to be the only thing you ever think about? No. And there are varying degrees of how much one needs to be, the artiste versus the entrepreneur versus the suit, depending on your job and your profession and that sort of thing, whether you're a piece in a larger organization or whether you're a solo artist or solo creator. But, it is business, and you have to take what works and then get rid of what isn't working, focus on your core competencies and then expand from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, as we move towards wrapping up, a lot of people that are listening to this are comic people or book people or some sort of content creator people. And everyone wants to make a movie, right? Everyone wants to make a thing or like so you've produced movies, you've produced shorts, you've produced things. Could you talk a little bit about the process from converting something from a book or a one piece of media into a movie or television or short film or something like that?
Sure. And full disclaimer, it's something I'm still learning as I go. Right now I have a feature documentary that's completed, but that's not based on pre-existing IP like a book or anything like that. Obviously, it does feature IP in it. I am currently trying to adapt a book and trying to work out the option with the author.
It doesn't have to necessarily be just like basically the process of like someone has a script or mm-hmm. something has a piece of something, and they want the question that I get asked all the time living in LA and working in publishing as I do is, well, like, I'm gonna I'm just gonna make it a movie as if it just like will magically happen from like
Right.
Saskatchewan, and like somebody is just going to be like, all right, put that into production from like your little thing from like your house in Saskatchewan to like Disney, and it's just like there's a straight line.
Right.
And
Right.
so I guess the question that I'm really trying to get to is like, what is the not straight line between like the kid in Saskatchewan who's got something and like getting it greenlit? Maybe not by Disney, although you do have development experience as well, but from like getting it actually made.
Right. So I think it really depends on, because you're right, it isn't a straight line, and it really just depends on um, how it is being approached, right? Is this existing within the studio system, the feature studio system? Is it existing within the TV system? Which, I know you've been going out on pitches and whatnot, and it's a different system. Like it works differently than films.
It's so different.
And then also, the independent feature world is also very different. Um, I don't say independent TV because that unfortunately is not quite a thing yet. Just because of the way TV is structured, it's not really built for independent financing the way that film can be. Um, but I think if you are like a random person with a random book, the best thing you can do is build a community, a rabid fan base and community around your property. Um, and I don't just mean like, 30 people who, show up at your booth at every con. I mean, that is really nice. But, you know, like take like One Piece, right? You go on their subreddit, it's huge. Um, and, in one hand, like the stratification of everything um, in the entertainment space it can be frustrating, but it can also be really good because what it means is that, like back in the day, like a TV show on the broadcast networks had to pull in just like millions and millions of viewers. Now there's so many like niche cable networks and now streaming services that, if you can bring in a couple 100,000, that might be enough for certain networks where they're like, yeah, this is worth it for us. So, that's why that's really been driving this like race to acquire lots of IP because, if your IP has a committed enough fan base and people who want to see it in a different format, it's that guaranteed audience. Again, going back to that TV network model, they can now sell ads to people who want to target that audience. Now, I think as a creator, you have to be realistic about what you have, and that's the tough part, right? Because you make something that you like, something that you would want to consume yourself, and that doesn't mean everyone is going to want to consume that, and you may have an IP that's never going to have a fan base that's big enough to really merit being purchased, like as an IP property or adapted. And that's okay because it doesn't mean your story is bad. It doesn't mean your art is bad. It just means that the market might not be there. And there's always outliers. There's always content that's just it just needs a bigger voice, right? It needs a bigger platform, and suddenly people will fall in love with it. So that's always a possibility. But just knowing that you have to convince so many people that it's worth it to get them to give you that platform, just like anything else. I do think it's worth being realistic, and so it's worth looking at your IP and trying to figure out, is this suitable for the medium that I want to adapt it to? I get hit up all the time. I mean, the minute people find out I'm a filmmaker, they're like, "Oh man, my wife would make such a great movie," and I always want to ask them. And I don't because it would be super rude, but well, what part of your life? Like, what's the story? Like, what's the beginning, middle, and end of your life, or of the film? because films are stories. They need a beginning, middle, and end. And you could have a lot of interesting stuff that happened to you, but does that mean that there's a character arc there that the audience wants to follow? Probably not. I do think that some mediums adapt very well and others don't. Like comics, I think, do adapt very well to, film and TV and animation as well. Books can adapt very well. Some books don't because they're very cerebral and everything happens in their head. And, the one thing with film and TV is, you can't be inside the character's head. Everything has to be visually manifested outside for the audience to see. You can't have an inner monologue. I mean, you can. I mean, if you watch like You on Netflix, the whole thing is almost this whole inner monologue. But that's also part of what makes it special because most properties don't do that. And so, it's a different medium. And so you have to figure out, well, okay, does the IP that I've created, is it suitable for the medium that I think it could be adapted to? So there's not an easy answer, unfortunately. I think the biggest thing is training yourself and disciplining yourself to be self-aware. Knowing what you have on your hands, knowing the market that you're trying to sell to, and also just really trying to understand the industry that you're trying to break into. Like if you're trying to get your property into TV and film, you should understand how TV and film works to at least a rudimentary degree, just because otherwise, I mean, there's so many people out there who are just going to blow, smoke up your ass, and they're just going to take advantage of you or promise you things that just aren't going to happen because that's just not the way the world works at this stage in time. So educating yourself is also just so important. How
long does something like that take? Like, let's get down to brass to the biggest thing that infuriates me about people that like ask these questions is they think that like they're going to make something and then a year later it's going to be on television.
There's always an outlier. I forget who it was. There's a film writer who posted this whole Twitter thing recently, and it was like how to like succeed in film, like as a screenwriter, and like one of his main points was like, I think it was comparing it to like the lottery, and there's where a lot of people they just kind of think like, okay, I'm gonna write this one thing and it's gonna be a hit and it's gonna propel my career, and yeah, that does happen to some people, but it's like winning the lottery. And like how many people in real life, when you have bills to pay and all this, you have commitments and obligations, like would you take that chance of buying a lotto ticket and be like, this is it, this is my paycheck for the rest of the year? Like we would look at that person like, you're crazy. But then, artists so often do the same thing with their art, where they think like, okay, here's my Hail Mary, but this is gonna be it. It takes a long time. Because again, you have to build that audience. You have to create content that there's enough volume of it, there's enough of an audience that it's irresistible for people who see that as an opportunity to make money in their own vertical. Because no one is doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. I mean, like, I will say, like, executives, like, sometimes they get painted as these, like, cold-blooded sharks sometimes, and it's like, no, they're creatives in their own right, and they care about the artist too. Like, they want them to succeed, and they're excited when they get to like find a really cool comic and get it adapted and be like, hey, look what we did together. They're excited about that, but it's still a job, it's still their career, and like the whole point is for their company to make money. So, they have to see a way for them to make money and make enough money that it makes sense. So you have to get your IP to that point, and that doesn't happen overnight. Like how many comic books do you see where it's just like, okay, you put out a comic book and it's an instant success? It's very rare, and that's just as a comic book. And then when you take that and now you want to make it, you want to get it adapted, like just regular movies, I mean, it can take anywhere from, 2 to 10 years for a movie to get made sometimes, depending on how it's developed and who has the rights and how many hands it changes. And, and I mean, that's the challenge of movies. TV
Yeah, it's a big lumbering beast, and you're asking somebody to put millions of dollars. I mean, if you're going to get like life-changing money, like let's say you expect to get $1 million for like the payout for your book, right? Like that's life-changing money, maybe even $100,000. Like think of how much money has to be invested in a project for you to make that amount of money. Like it's going to be an obscene amount of money that like you can't just. I could go and make a comic book for 10 grand, which is a lot of money. I'm not saying it's not a lot of money, but like you cannot make a Disney level movie for 10 grand.
Yeah, I mean anything, and this always surprises people. I mean, any movie under 5 million is considered a low budget.
Right. And I mean, for me, like you've known me pretty much since I started Ichabod, and like it's only now 10 years later getting any traction at all. And honestly, we've had a showrunner for almost 2 years now, and we're still haven't been out pitching like networks and studios yet because we've been trying to do all of the stuff that you have to do. Like I have the property, it's got a pretty good audience. Like we just had a big launch for the new volume. You know, I've been a full-time comic creator for 5 years now. I've been out pitching this show for 10 years, and it's only been in the last 2 that anything's happened. And honestly, we've only really gotten to the point where we could go pitch it in the last year or so, and probably more like 7 or 8 months if you really put it down to that. So like and I've lived in LA since 2008 trying to get this stuff done and released dozens of projects and like this, for some reason, after 10 years, finally found somebody that connected to it, that like took it seriously and wanted to make it. And the last 2 years have been like putting the pieces together so we could have a strong pitch for it, developing more issues so that when somebody looked at the book, it felt like the series we were pitching, and putting all the ducks in a row. So like I wrote Ichabod, the first issue, in 2010, and it's gone through multiple publishers, dozens of pitch meetings, multiple managers and management team stuff. And it's only now that we're actually talking about like bringing it out to do pitches. And every single day, like that, this is all that executives do. Literally most days is they sit down and they listen to pitches for 8 hours or 6 hours or 4 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, and pitch in like high seasons from people that want to like get their show made. And from all of those people, there's a finite amount of pilots that can be ordered. There's a finite amount of movies that can be made. There's a finite budget, and you're competing with all of those people, and it takes a long time.
You're competing against all those people. It takes a long time just to get money together. Also, just because people have limited amounts of time, right? So like, they're going to read your stuff on their timetable and according to their priorities, not yours. So like you may be waiting a while, even just like, you could have like a cast contingent project where like people are into it. Like, yeah, this would be great, but it only works if we can get a certain quality of actor attached or a certain quality of director, producer attached or whatever. And so now you're waiting for that person to have the time to read it and think about it. And it can take months just for them to say no.
And that's even if they want to do it because like they have to pay their bills and they've got projects that are really like in the hopper or in production, or, you know, any of these studios or people that are, not that there are people that are not busy that aren't worth working with, but like when you're talking about like the in-demand people, like they all are working on projects, getting paid for projects, developing their own projects, and like you've got to somehow slot in there, and you're going to slot in unless it's a massive project. Like I'll bet if the people from One Piece came over and wanted to have meetings, like they would get those meetings much quicker because there's already a rabid fan base attached to that someone can look at and say, hey, when you go into that meeting, executive, when you go into that meeting with your boss and say, why does this hop to the top of the pile above the other million projects that we get pitched, that executive can look back and say, well, you know, here is the reasons why we should take this seriously instead of put this at the bottom of our pile.
Right, exactly. And ultimately it boils down to value, right? It's like, what value are you bringing to the table? What value are you offering to the person, to the gatekeeper you're trying to convince? And being respectful of that, and knowing, again, just being self-aware, you know, like if someone is, I mean, people have to pay their bills and they have the normal course of their business. So, you know, if your story, your property fits within the normal course of their business, then yes, it will eventually become a priority, theoretically, right? If they're interested. If it doesn't fit within that normal course of business, they're not going to have time, and it's not going to help them to take the time away from their business to look at your stuff. I mean, the other hard thing too, and unfortunately, you know, this is tough, is like the goalposts move. They're not set in stone. You know, what networks are looking for this season is going to be different than what they're looking for next season. So it's an ever-shifting target, which is good and bad, right? Because, you know, you could have a product that's just not commercial at all 5 years ago, but now suddenly people are like, this is it. Like, I can't believe you have this. No one else has this. And you're like, well, I've always been here. Why didn't you talk to me then?
You're speaking my language, man. You're speaking my language.
Right. But in reality, it's just because the needs change. And I think ultimately, you know, kind of what we're talking about is like, as a creative, your goal shouldn't be to win the lottery. Your goal should be to build a strong foundation for your creative business, right? Like, you need to structure things so that you're empowered to continually put out content and keep your head above water while doing it. And if you're able to stay afloat, you're always putting out content, you're always able to continue building your audience, you know, you will probably, I mean, I can't say probably, but like, there's a much better chance that you're going to eventually reach that critical mass where people actually will be interested. Because like, hey, this has longevity. It's not a flash in the pan. Oh, this has an audience. People want to read these books. And like, they're not thinking about the fact that, like, you know, yeah, you had to completely restructure your business model so that way you could put out multiple issues and, you know, pour in all this time and energy into building up a Facebook fan group or a subreddit or whatever. All they see is the audience, but like, it's still up to you to have built that audience. And so you have to create a business model that is sustainable so that you can do that. But I think that's honestly the best way to go after the sort of Hollywood dream of getting something adapted, is just like creating a property that has legs, that's not going to disappear because, you know, you can't afford to put out more issues, or you can't afford to engage with your audience or anything like that, you know?
I love it. All right. So this seems like the perfect place to come to a close, but I do want to give you a chance to talk about any projects that you have coming up, or anything that you would like people to check out. Yeah.
So I mentioned that I recently produced a feature documentary. It's called Game Master. We have sales reps attached, and they're currently taking offers on potential domestic distribution acquisitions. So at a certain point, that will be available for the public to watch.
The trailer is available right now to watch.
It is, yes. There's a Deadline article where we announced the film for AFM, which is the American Film Market. And it's about tabletop gaming and specifically tabletop game designers. So the folks who are trying to create these games and essentially figure out, can I make a vocation out of this? And then every so often we cut away and we talk to, the big fish in that industry and the big wigs. So it'd be the equivalent of, someone making a documentary about me as a filmmaker, and then every so often we talk to Steven Spielberg. So if you're at all interested in that world and tabletop games, you want to know how those get made and who the kind of people are that are making them. Spoiler alert, they're a lot like you and me, just creatives who have a dream and want to make it a reality. Then that's the movie for you.
Love it, and that has been. You've been working on that. To go back to our previous discussion, like this has been a long time through the entire process. When did you get attached to that project? Out of curiosity.
I got attached, I believe, it was the beginning of 2017.
And it already had some like it was already like rolling a little bit before then, right?
Yeah. So there was a small crew of folks who initially came together to do it. So Jimmy Wynn, our executive producer on it, he and his friends. All of this kind of came about from he and his friends. He and Charles, who was our director. They'd go to these game conventions, and they'd play these games and see people trying to sell their own games. And I believe, and maybe he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but they saw a guy selling like his like homemade game like out of his car, and he's like, "Man, I wonder if it's any good." And they bought it. And he's like, "You know what? I bet there's a movie here," and like surrounding just these people who are they're just trying to make this happen. And so he started putting together that team of people to work on it, and the team changed as people's availabilities and interests came and went. And then they were kind of looking for some help with the just production logistics side of things, just because my producing partner Wally and I we have a lot of experience making short form content for advertisers and brands. So we're very well versed in just physical production and also post production. So he brought us on board and my company Ariad Films. And once our core team was in place, then things started to progress from there. But it was a slog. It was a 3.5 year project. Where we raise money and finance it to a certain point, and then shoot as much as we could, and then we'd have to go finance it some more and shoot more. And there was a point when like our director, DP, and producer Wally was on the road, and they were doing a trip around the country to interview people. And Wally and we were waiting on some financing to close. And Wally and I had like a secret milestone where like by a certain day in a certain city on their trip, if this financing had not closed by that point, they would have to turn the car around and drive back to LA. Because if they didn't, they would not have enough money to make it the rest of the trip, and they would not have enough money to get home. And luckily, we were able to get it all settled and the financing closed. But like, that was very much that journey of scrappy filmmaking. How do we make this possible so we can finish this thing up and get it in the can?
And still, even after 3 years, it's still not quite out yet. So that's what we're talking about when we say it takes a long, long time to get these things through, even when you have somebody excited to make the project. Even when you do. There's so much out of your control, so many other gatekeepers you have to get through. And no one's ever going to be as passionate about your project as you are. Absolutely. So,
but I will just say though, because like it can sound really negative, like, oh, it takes forever. So, just like I don't want the audience to think like, oh, don't don't try, right? If anything, the fact that it can take a long time is a good thing, because now you can take the pressure off of trying to be this like overnight success. No one is an overnight success. Even people who think they're an overnight or who look like they're an overnight success are not an overnight success. So if you're like a young creator, or not young, right? If you're a creator, period, at the start of their career, right? Don't worry about it and just concentrate on making something good and building an audience around that thing. And like how long you've been doing it does not speak to the value of what you're making or its prospects as a adaptation or a larger format or something like that. So even though it can sound very negative, I think if you adjust your expectations, it can be very liberating.
I love it. Thank you for bringing us back to a positive end. As we get going, if you could just tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah. So my Instagram is KWile Directs. So KWILE Directs. I also have a new Instagram for my company, Ariete Films. So it's AUREATE films.com. Ariete Films. And then our website is arietefilms.com. And there's a contact form on my website if anybody does want to reach out for any specific reason. That's it.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
So that was Chris Wile. I hope you enjoyed that one. I certainly did. If you did, go find him online and let him know how much you enjoyed it. And if you're enjoying this show, please make sure to rate, subscribe, and listen every episode. You can also head on over to thecompletecreative.com and check out all the rest of our content, sign up for our mailing list, and a whole lot more. And that's it for me. I look forward to talking with you next time. Bye-bye.